The orbital bombardment of Hive World of Eris began on the Feast of the Ascension. It was not an alien fleet that fired the cyclonic torpedoes. It was the Imperial Navy battleship Divine Right. The target was not a Tyranid infestation. It was the governor's palace. The crime was hope. 3 days earlier, Governor Hax had formally requested food aid from the Tempest Federation. He had broadcast a message of friendship to the Griffony sector. The High Lords of Terra answered with fire. On the surface, Arbitrator Silas Kren watched the sky turn white. He stood on the wall of Precinct Fortress 9. His armor was cracked. He had not slept in 40 hours. He held a riot shield that was battered by bricks thrown by starving citizens. The citizens were not screaming for blood. They were holding up blue cloth. They were chanting the name of the slime. Silas knew that in the Imperium, asking for a full belly was a death sentence. The shockwave from the palace hit the precinct. The wall shook. Dust poured from the gargoyles above. Silas fell to his knees. He looked at the crowd below. They stopped chanting. They looked up at the burning atmosphere. They realized that their prayers had been answered with exterminatus. Silas checked his ammunition counter. He had 12 rounds left in his shotgun. He checked his ration pouch. It contained half a bar of corpse starch. It was moldy. He ate it anyway. The taste was bitter, like the ash filling the air. He looked at his partner, Enforcer Vane. Vane was crying. Vane had a small blue crest hidden inside his flak vest. Silas knew it. He had not reported it. Now, they were both going to burn. On the bridge of the Divine Right, Inquisitor Lord Valerius watched the tactical hololith. He was a man of 80 years, kept alive by rejuvenate treatments and hatred. He wore the crimson rosette of the Ordo Hereticus. He did not smile as the Hive City died. He felt only the grim satisfaction of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. Beside him stood Canoness Aria of the Order of the Valorous Heart. She gripped her bolter. She refused to look at the screen. She prayed silently. Valerius turned away from the destruction. He looked at the star map. The Griffonan sector was a blue stain on the golden map of the Imperium. It was spreading. Avarice was just the symptom. The disease was Rimuru Tempest. Valerius knew about Robot Gilliman's order. He knew about the Omega Vermilion decree to leave the Federation alone. He did not care. To Valerius, a Primarch who tolerates a Xenos is a Primarch who has lost his way. Valerius served the Emperor, not the Lord Commander. He walked to the comm station. He ordered the fleet to prepare for a warp jump. They were not going back to Terra. They were going to the edge of the Griffone sector. Valerius had not come with just a battleship. He had brought a cargo. In the hold of his ship, inside stasis fields, were 7 Culexus Assassins. They were anti-psychers. They were souls that did not exist. They were the ultimate weapon against a creature made of magic. Valerius believed that Rimuru was a warp entity, and he intended to snuff it out like a candle. The astropath on the bridge convulsed. He began to bleed from his eyes. He screamed a warning. He said the shadow in the warp was shifting. He said the great devourer was angry. But Valerius ignored him. He was blinded by his crusade. He did not see that by attacking Avaris, he had weakened the sector's defenses. He had broken the line. And in the dark void beyond the rim, something ancient and hungry saw the flames. The Tyranids of Hive Fleet Kronos were moving. They were the anti-chaos fleet. They hunted magic. And the brightest magic in the galaxy was sitting on the throne of Griffon 4. The three-way war was about to begin. The Federation was no longer a buffer state. It was the main course. The atmosphere in the capital city of Rimuru on Griffon 4 was deceptive. To a casual observer, it looked like paradise. The streets were clean. The manufactorums hummed with the quiet efficiency of electric engines rather than the roaring smog of Promethium. Children played in the parks with small wooden toys. carved by retired Tempest Templars. But inside the central spire, the air was heavy. Rimuru Tempest sat at his desk. He was buried under a mountain of data slates. Being a king was hard. Being a living saint was harder. He had to approve grain shipments. He had to mediate disputes between the tech priests and the Tau engineers. The tech priests wanted to bless the toaster. The Tau wanted to upgrade the toaster. It was a headache. Rimuru rubbed his temples. He looked at the ration report. Food stocks were high. Water was pure. But the morale report was yellow. The people were scared. They had seen the sky turn green when the Necrons came. They knew the galaxy was full of monsters. Rimuru sighed. He wanted to go to the hot springs. He wanted to eat Shion's cooking, even if it was dangerous. He picked up a slate marked Refugee Status. It listed the new arrivals from the Avaris system. Suddenly, the door to his office slammed open. High Marshal Helbrecht marched in. He did not knock. He was not wearing his helmet. His face was a mask of cold fury. He held a crumpled piece of paper in his metal hand. It was a printout from a deep space augur. Rimuru stood up. He sensed the anger radiating from his friend. He asked what was wrong. Helbrecht did not speak. He placed the paper on the desk. Rimuru looked at it. It was a grainy image of a planet. Or what used to be a planet. The sphere was cracked. The atmosphere was on fire. The oceans were boiling into space. It was a dead world. Helbrecht spoke in a low voice. He said it was Avaris. He said the governor had asked for help. He said the Imperium answered with an exterminatus cyclonic torpedo. They burned the world to prevent it from joining the Federation. 10 billion people were dead. They died because they wanted to be Rimuru's friends. Rimuru felt a cold knot in his stomach. He sat down slowly. He remembered the governor of Avaris, a fat, jovial man who just wanted to feed his people. Rimuru had sent a convoy of grain. The convoy never arrived. The Imperium had intercepted it and destroyed it. Rimuru looked at his hands. He had saved Griffone IV. He had saved Velos. But he couldn't save everyone. The galaxy was too big. The hatred was too deep. He asked Seal for an analysis. Seal replied instantly. The attack on Avaris was a message. It was a warning from the High Lords of Terra. It meant that anyone who accepted Federation aid would be executed. It was a strategy of terror. Rimuru clenched his fist. The slate on his desk cracked. He told Helbrecht to prepare the fleet. He wanted to find the ship that did this. He wanted to find the captain and ask him why. Helbrecht shook his head. He said the ship was already gone. It was the divine right. An Inquisitor's ship. They strike and vanish. But they hadn't vanished. In the high orbit of Griffone IV, a single transport shuttle drifted among the civilian traffic. It was marked as a grain hauler. It had valid codes. The codes had been stolen from the wreckage of the Avaris convoy. Inside the shuttle, there was no grain. There were 7 stasis pods. Inquisitor Valerius stood in the cockpit. He watched the blue planet below. He did not feel guilt for Avaris. He felt efficiency. He had cut off the limb to save the body. Now, he would cut out the heart. He pressed a rune on the console. The shuttle began its descent. It did not aim for the spaceport. It aimed for the palace gardens. The automated defenses of the Federation scanned the ship. They detected biological life. They detected grain signatures. They let it pass. Valerius smiled. The arrogance of the Xenos was their weakness. They trusted too much. The shuttle landed in the East Garden. It crushed a bed of rare flowers. The ramp lowered. Valerius did not walk out. He activated the stasis pods. The hiss of gas filled the cargo bay. 7 figures stepped out. They wore black body glove suits. They wore helmets that looked like oversized, elongated skulls. They had no eyes. They had no faces. They were Culexus Assassins. The Culexus are the most terrifying of all Imperial assassins. They do not kill with guns or knives. They kill with their souls, or rather, their lack of souls. They are pariahs, blanks. They are a hole in the universe. Magic dies near them. Psychic energy vanishes. To a normal human, they induce nausea and terror. To a psyker, they are agony. To a magical slime, they are poison. Rimuru was in his office when the sickness hit him. It wasn't a physical pain. It was a sudden, violent emptiness. It felt like someone had unplugged the world. The magicules in the air evaporated. The lights, powered by magic batteries, flickered and died. Rimuru fell to his knees. His body felt heavy. He couldn't maintain his human form properly. His hand turned into slime. Helbrecht drew his sword. He felt it too. The dread, the irrational fear. He was a space marine. He knew no fear, but this was primal. This was the fear of the prey sensing the predator. Pariahs, Helbrecht gasped. Assassins! The window of the office shattered. Not from a bullet, from a sound. A scream that wasn't a sound. The animus speculum, the eye on the helmet of the lead assassin, focused on Rimuru. A beam of negative energy shot through the room. Rimuru tried to block it. He raised his hand to cast Gluttony. Nothing happened. The skill failed. The magicules dissolved before they could form the barrier. The beam hit Rimuru's chest. It didn't burn. It erased. It deleted the magical energy that held his cells together. Rimuru flew backward. He slammed into the wall. He coughed up blue fluid. It was the first time he had bled in this world. 3 assassins vaulted through the broken window. They moved like spiders. They were fast, faster than the eye could follow. They didn't speak. They didn't taunt. They just killed. Helbrecht intercepted the first one. He swung his sword. The assassin ducked under the blade. It touched Helbrecht's armor. The touch drained the power from the servo motors. The armor locked up. Helbrecht fell. The assassin raised a monomolecular dagger to stab Helbrecht in the neck. Ranga! Rimuru shouted. But Ranga did not come out of the shadow. Ranga was a spirit wolf. He lived in Rimuru's shadow. The pariah field had sealed the shadow. Ranga was trapped. Rimuru was alone. He was weak. His magic was gone. Ciel! Rimuru screamed in his mind. What do I do? Analysis. Ciel's voice was distorted, like a radio with bad reception. Magic circuits disrupted. Soul corridor blocked. Enemy is a null entity. Recommendation. Abandon magical attacks. Use physical mass. Use physics. Rimuru looked at the assassin approaching him. The skull helmet glowed with a sick light. The assassin charged. Rimuru didn't try to cast a spell. He didn't try to summon a sword. He let his body liquefy. He became a puddle on the floor. The assassin stabbed the puddle. The knife went through to the stone. Then Rimuru moved. He launched himself not as a warrior, but as a bullet. He used hydraulic pressure. He condensed his slime body and expanded it instantly. He hit the assassin in the chest. The impact was like a cannonball. The assassin flew back. Ribs cracked. The assassin hit the far wall and slid down. But it got back up. It didn't feel pain. The other 2 assassins turned on Rimuru. They fired their neuroshredder gauntlets. Invisible waves of toxins washed over the slime. Rimuru felt his consciousness fading. The toxins were attacking his mind, bypassing his poison resistance because his resistance was magically powered. The door to the office exploded inward. Cheyenne stood there. She held her massive sword, Hercules' edge. She looked at Rimuru on the floor. She saw the black figures. Her single horn glowed, but dimly. "Get away from him!" Cheyenne roared. She charged. She didn't use magic. She used brute strength. She was an Oni. Her muscles were naturally dense. She swung her sword like a baseball bat. One assassin turned to block. It raised its hand to drain her energy. Xion didn't care about energy. She cared about mass. The sword hit the assassin. The assassin exploded. Armor, bone, and black suit turned into paste. The pariah effect hurt Xion. She felt like vomiting. Her knees were shaking. But her rage was stronger than her fear. She stood over Rimuru. "Are you okay, Rimuru-sama?" she asked, panting. "I can't. Use magic," Rimuru whispered. "They turn it off." "Then we squash them," Xion said. The remaining 6 assassins regrouped. They circled Xion and Rimuru. They opened the irises of their animus speculums. They were going to fire together. A combined blast of negative soul energy. It would wipe Rimuru out of existence. Rimuru looked at Xion. She was brave, but she would die. He couldn't let that happen. He forced his mind to focus. Ciel was right. Physics. "Xion," Rimuru whispered. "Throw me." "What?" "Throw me at them. Hard." Xion didn't hesitate. She grabbed Rimuru's slime body. She spun around. She channeled all her physical strength. She threw Rimuru like a fastball. Rimuru flew through the air. As he flew, he ordered Ciel to shift his internal composition. He didn't use magic. He used chemistry. He turned his body into a non-Newtonian fluid, harder than diamond upon impact. He hit the lead assassin in the face. The impact shattered the skull helmet. The animus speculum broke. The negative energy backfired. The assassin erupted in a vortex of black light. The explosion knocked the other assassins down. Rimuru bounced off the wall and landed on the floor. He shifted back to fluid. He slithered over the second assassin. He didn't eat its soul. He ate its body. He dissolved the suit. He dissolved the flesh. He spat out the bones. The fear in the room lifted slightly. With 2 pariahs dead, the field was weaker. A spark of magic returned. Helbrecht broke free of his locked armor. He forced the servos to move. He grabbed the assassin that had tried to kill him. He didn't use his sword. He used his metal hand. He crushed the assassin's throat. "For the Chancellor!" Helbrecht roared. The fight turned into a brawl. It was messy. It was brutal. Without magic, Rimuru and his commanders had to fight like animals. They bit. They clawed. They smashed. Finally, the last assassin fell. Xion cut him in half. Silence returned to the office. Rimuru transformed back into his human form. He was pale. He was shaking. He looked at the bodies. They were human, but twisted. They had been tortured and modified until they were weapons. "They sent monsters to kill a monster," Rimuru said quietly. "They nearly succeeded," Helbrecht said. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts. "The Culexus are rare. To send 7, the High Lords are desperate." Rimuru walked to the window. He looked out at the garden. The shuttle was still there. He saw a figure running toward it. Inquisitor Valerius. Rimuru felt a flash of anger. Not the cold anger of a king. The hot anger of a victim. "He's getting away," Xion said. "I can't catch him. I'm too tired." Rimuru looked at his hand. He tried to summon a black lightning bolt. It fizzled. He was still too weak. "Let him go," Rimuru said. "What?" Helbrecht looked shocked. "He killed Avaris. He tried to kill you." "Let him go," Rimuru repeated. "He needs to deliver a message." "What message?" "That they missed," Rimuru said. Valerius reached his shuttle. He launched. He flew back to the Divine Right, waiting at the edge of the system. He was terrified. 7 assassins. The cost of a sector fleet. Gone in minutes. And the slime was still alive. Back in the office, Rimuru sat on the floor. He drank a potion Xion handed him. It tasted terrible, but it helped. "Ciel," Rimuru said. "Status report." "Report," Ciel said. "Magicule recovery at 10%. Physical damage repairing. Threat assessment updated. The Imperium possesses hard counters to your existence. We cannot stay defensive. If they send 100 assassins, we lose. I know, Rimuru said. He looked at Helbrecht. You said the High Lords are on Terra? Yes, Helbrecht said. In the Imperial Palace. And Guilliman? He is on crusade. He is not on Terra. So the people trying to kill me are sitting alone on the throne world, Rimuru mused. Rimuru-sama, Helbrecht warned. You cannot go to Terra. The psychic defenses of the Emperor. The Custodes. It is suicide. Even for you. I'm not going to Terra, Rimuru said. Not yet. But I need to make them look away. I need a distraction. What kind of distraction? The kind that scares them more than I do, Rimuru said. He stood up. He walked to the map on the wall. He pointed to the galactic east, past the Federation, into the deep void. Kronos, Rimuru said. The Hive Fleet? Helbrecht asked. The one coming for us? Yes, Rimuru said. The anti-chaos fleet. The fleet that eats magic. They are attracted to high-energy signatures. Like us, Cheyenne said. Like us, Rimuru agreed. But there is something brighter than us. Something with more magic. Something the Tyranids hate more than slimes. He pointed to the galactic north, to the Great Rift, to the Eye of Terror, or specifically, to the plague stars where Mortarion was hiding. We are going to change the bait, Rimuru said. We are going to lure Kronos away from Griffon. We are going to send them to Mortarion's house. That is impossible, Helbrecht said. You cannot talk to Tyranids. I don't need to talk to them, Rimuru said. I just need to ring the dinner bell. He looked at the dead assassins. He had an idea. A twisted, dangerous idea. These assassins, Rimuru said. They are blanks. They are invisible to the warp. But to the Tyranids, they are confusing. If we can reverse their polarity, if we can turn a blank into a beacon. Magos Hesh can do it, Helbrecht said slowly. He can reverse the animus speculum. But it is heresy. It is tech heresy of the highest order. Add it to the list, Rimuru said. The Federation was done playing defense. They were done being the nice guys. The Imperium had sent their executioners. Now, Rimuru would send a force of nature. He ordered the bodies of the assassins to be taken to the lab. He ordered the fleet to prepare for a shadow operation. They weren't going to fight the Tyranids. They were going to herd them. Rimuru looked out at the stars. The peace was over. The era of manipulation had begun. He would play the factions against each other. He would make the galaxy burn so his people could live in the shade. Cheyenne, Rimuru said. Get the car. Where are we going? We're going to catch a Hive fleet, Rimuru said. The first step was survival. The second step was redirection. The third step would be judgment. The High Lords of Terra had thrown a stone at a hornet's nest. They didn't realize that the hornet was smart, and the hornet knew where they slept. But deep in the void, the hive mind of Kronos paused. It felt the death of the assassins. It felt the void in the force. It was curious. It turned its billions of eyes toward Griffoni 4. It was coming faster now. Rimuru had days, not weeks. The race to build the beacon began. The laboratory of Magos Hesh was usually a place of cold logic and rhythmic ticking. Today, it was a butcher shop of souls. On the steel slabs lay the bodies of the 7 Culexus Assassins. Their black suits had been stripped away. Their pale, hairless flesh looked like marble in the harsh light. But the horror was not the bodies. It was the helmets. The animus speculums, the giant skull-shaped projectors that fired negative energy, were being dismantled. Hesh used a laser scalpel to cut into the psycho-reactive crystal matrix. He did not recite the prayers of the machine god. He muttered calculations of heresy. Rimuru stood in the corner. He had his arms crossed. He felt sick. Even dead, the assassins radiated a faint aura of wrongness. It made his slime oscillate. CL was monitoring the procedure. She guided Hesh's hands. They were doing the impossible. They were inverting the polarity of a pariah. A pariah is a sinkhole in the warp. It absorbs. Rimuru wanted to turn it into a fountain. He wanted to push so much magical energy through the crystal that it overloaded the negative space and created a super positive flare, a psychic scream that would be heard across the segmentum. Hesh finished the connection. He wired the 7 helmets together into a sphere. It looked like a totem of death. He connected it to a magicule battery the size of a tank. "It is ready," Hesh's mechanical voice grated. "The beacon of gluttony. When activated, it will simulate the psychic presence of a Primarch-level entity, but it will be unstable. The crystals will shatter in 1 hour." "1 hour is enough," Rimuru said. "Is the drone ship ready?" "The Pale Rider is fueled," Hesh said. "Course set for the Scourge Stars." Rimuru nodded. He touched the glass of the observation window. This was a gamble. If it failed, he would have just announced his position to every demon in the galaxy. If it worked, he would drag the Tyranids into a war they might not win. The operation began at 0600 hours. The Federation fleet moved to the edge of the Griffin system. They ran silent. No active sensors. No void shields. Just cold metal drifting in the dark. In the center of the formation was the Pale Rider. It was a modified freighter, stripped of life support and packed with the beacon. Rimuru stood on the bridge of the Star of Tempest. He watched the sensor feed. The stars in the east were disappearing. A black stain was moving against the background of the galaxy. Hive Fleet Kronos. The shadow in the warp preceded it. It was not a chaotic storm like the Great Rift. It was a suffocating blanket. The crew felt it. The astropaths began to weep. The navigators curled into balls, blind to the light of the Astronomicon. "They are here," Helbrecht whispered. He gripped the hilt of his sword. His cybernetic hand whirred, fighting the dampening field. "Activate the beacon," Rimuru ordered. On the Pale Rider, the battery engaged. Energy flooded the assassin helmets. The crystals screamed. A pulse of invisible light erupted from the freighter. To the naked eye, nothing happened. To the warp, it was a supernova. It was a dinner bell ringing in a quiet room. The black stain shifted. The hive mind of Kronos reacted instantly. It felt the surge of delicious, unprotected energy. It ignored the planets. It ignored the suns. It turned its billions of eyes toward the Pale Rider. The massive bioships, shaped like ticks and leeches, fired their reaction drives. They accelerated with impossible speed. "They took the bait," Shion said, watching the tactical plot. "They are chasing the drone." "Launch the drone," Rimuru said. The Pale Rider engines flared. It shot away from the fleet, heading toward the warp jump point that led to the Scourge Stars. The Tyranids followed. It looked like a school of sharks, chasing a bleeding fish. Rimuru let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It was working. Then the universe laughed. The Pale Rider reached the jump point. Its warp drive began to cycle. But just as reality began to tear, a beam of energy shot from the lead hive ship. It wasn't a laser. It was a bioelectric disruptor. It hit the Pale Rider. The warp field collapsed. The engines died. The drone ship drifted, dead in space. "Malfunction," Seal reported. "Kronos has employed a warp-dampening spore minefield. They anticipated the escape." "They're too smart," Rimuru hissed. The Tyranid fleet caught the Pale Rider. They didn't shoot it. They swarmed it. Tentacles the size of cities wrapped around the hull. They tore it open. They found the beacon. They found the machine. And they realized it was a trick. The hive mind screamed. It was a psychic backlash that hit every mind in the system. It was pure anger. The Tyranids realized the food was fake. They looked around for the real food. They looked for the source of the signal. They looked at Rimuru. The black stain turned again. It abandoned the wreckage of the drone. It turned toward the silent Federation fleet. "Start the engines!" Rimuru yelled. "Get us out of here!" "Void shields coming online," Helbrecht shouted. "We are detected. All ships, evasive maneuvers." The silence broke. The Federation fleet lit up their drives. They scattered, but Kronos was a hunter of the highest order. It didn't chase the small ships. It identified the Star of Tempest. It smelled the unique soul signature of the slime. A Hive ship, classified as a specialized mage killer, launched itself at Rimuru's flagship. It fired a barrage of spore pods. The pods hit the void shields. They didn't explode. They leached. They drained the shield energy like parasites. "Shields down to 40%, the tactical officer screamed. "Return fire," Helbrecht ordered. "Broadsides, pattern beta." The Star of Tempest unleashed its macro cannons. The shells hit the Hive ship. They blew chunks of chitin into space, but the ship didn't slow down. It healed. The biomass knitted together in seconds. "Magic attacks!" Shion yelled. "Rimuru-sama, use the flare!" "I can't." Rimuru gritted his teeth. "If I use magic, they eat it. Kronos absorbs spell energy. We have to use physical rounds only." This was the catastrophe. The Federation's greatest strength, their magical technology, was useless. Their railguns worked, but they weren't enough. The Hive ship slammed into the side of the Star of Tempest. The impact threw everyone to the deck. Metal screamed as organic claws tore through the adamantium hull. The ship shook violently. "Boarding action!" Helbrecht roared. "Decks 4, 5, and 6, repel intruders." Rimuru stood up. He felt the intruders. They weren't genestealers. They were worse. Zoanthropes, Seal warned, and specialized anti-psyker bioforms. They are coming for the bridge. Rimuru grabbed his katana. "Shion, Helbrecht, with me. We hold the corridor." They ran to the main junction. The blast doors were melting. Green acid ate through the steel. The doors collapsed. The enemy poured in. They were tall, floating creatures with exposed brains protected by bony crests. Zoanthropes. But these were Kronos strain. Their skin was pale white. Their eyes burned with null energy. Behind them scuttled gaunts with black carapaces. A zoanthrope fired a psychic blast. It wasn't a blast of force. It was a blast of silence. It hit Shion. She fell to one knee, clutching her head. Her Oni aura flickered and died. "Shion!" Rimuru yelled. He charged. He didn't use Shunpo. He ran. He dodged a scything talon from a gaunt and cut its head off. The sword cut deep, but it felt heavy. The air was thick with the shadow in the warp. He reached the zoanthrope. It turned its gaze on him. It tried to suck his soul out. Rimuru felt a pulling sensation in his chest. It hurt. It felt like his core was being ripped loose. "No," Rimuru growled. "You don't get to eat me." He headbutted the zoanthrope. It was a physical blow. The creature's crest cracked. It fell back, stunned. Rimuru stabbed his sword into its brain. The creature shrieked and died. Helbrecht was fighting like a demon. His bolter was empty. He was using his combat knife and his cybernetic fist. He punched a gaunt so hard its rib cage exploded. "There are too many!" Helbrecht yelled. "We are being overrun!" Rimuru looked down the corridor. Hundreds more were coming. The ship was infested. They couldn't win an attrition fight. They needed to leave. "Ciel, can we warp jump?" Rimuru asked. "Negative," Ciel said. "The Hive ship attached to our hull is anchoring us to real space. Its mass shadow prevents translation." "Then we cut it off," Rimuru said. "How?" Shion asked, wiping blood from her nose. "Gravity," Rimuru said. "We can't use magic outside, but we can use the ship's artificial gravity drive. If I overload the internal compensators, I can create a localized singularity on the hull." "That will tear the ship apart," Helbrecht said. "It will tear the bug apart too," Rimuru said. "It's our only chance." Rimuru connected his mind to the ship's machine spirit. He felt the pain of the vessel. He apologized to it. Then he accessed the engineering deck. He found the gravity generators. He disabled the safety protocols. "Hold on to something!" Rimuru screamed. He reversed the polarity of the port-side gravity plating. The effect was instantaneous. The side of the Star of Tempest, where the Hive ship was attached, suddenly experienced a gravity spike of 10,000 Gs. The hull buckled. The Hive ship's tentacles snapped under their own weight. The bioship was crushed against the Federation vessel, then repelled violently as the generator exploded. The explosion blew a hole in the Star of Tempest the size of a city block. Atmosphere vented into space, sucking the Tyranid borders out with it. The Hive ship, mangled and bleeding, drifted away. "Now!" Rimuru shouted. "Jump! Anywhere!" The navigator, bleeding from his ears, punched the emergency rune. The warp drive engaged. The Star of Tempest screamed as it tore a hole in reality. It didn't enter the calm waters of the Imperium. It entered the storm. The jump was rough. It felt like being put in a blender. The ship shook for 10 minutes. Then, silence. They dropped out of warp. The emergency lights were red. The air smelled of ozone and burnt meat. "Status?" Rimuru coughed. "We are alive," Helbrecht said. "Hull integrity at 30%. Engines critical." "Where are we?" Cheyenne asked. Rimuru looked at the view screen. The stars were gone. Instead, the void was filled with a sickly green fog. Nebulas of rot swirled around them. In the distance, 3 massive planets hung in the dark. They looked like diseased organs. "The Scourge stars," Helbrecht whispered in horror. "We jumped straight into hell." "We made it," Rimuru said. "This is where I wanted to go." "But Rimuru-sama," Shion pointed to the rear sensors. "Look!" Rimuru looked. Behind them, the warp tear was still open, and pouring out of it came the Hive fleet. Kronos had followed them. The Tyranids had tracked the wound in reality. "Good," Rimuru said, though his hands were shaking. "The guests have arrived." But then, the forward sensors alarm screamed. From the green fog of the Scourge stars, a fleet emerged. These ships were ancient. They were bloated with corruption. They were covered in rust and weeping sores. The symbol of the 3 skulls was painted on their hulls. The Death Guard. And leading them was the Terminus Est, Mortarion's flagship. Rimuru stood between 2 apocalypses. Behind him, the infinite hunger of the Tyranids. In front of him, the infinite rot of Nurgle, and his ship was broken. "This," Rimuru said, forcing a smile, "is going to be a very interesting party." "We are trapped," Helbrecht said. "We have no weapons. We have no shields." "We have one weapon," Rimuru said. "We are the irritation. We are the thing they both hate." He opened a fleet-wide channel. Not to his own ships, to everyone. To the Tyranids and the Death Guard. "Attention," Rimuru broadcasted. His voice was amplified by the last reserves of the ship's power. "I brought you guys some friends. Now play nice." The reaction was immediate. The hive mind of Kronos sensed the massive psychic presence of the Death Guard. To Kronos, the Death Guard tasted like spoiled meat, but it was still warp energy. It was a threat. The Tyranids prioritized the bigger threat. They stopped chasing the small, broken Federation ship. They turned their guns toward the massive Chaos fleet. Mortarion, on the bridge of the Terminus Est, saw the Tyranids. He felt the shadow in the warp suppressing his plagues. He hated Tyranids. They didn't rot. They just ate. They were the antithesis of Nurgle's garden. "Fire," Mortarion rasped. "Kill the vermin." The space between the 2 fleets erupted. Bioplasma met viral torpedoes. The Scourge stars lit up with the fires of a war that had nothing to do with humanity. Rimuru ordered his pilot, "Gobta, get us into the debris field. Hide." The Star of Tempest limped away from the center of the battle. They hid inside the wreck of a destroyed Chaos cruiser. They powered down. They watched. It was a clash of titans. The Tyranids were adapting to the plagues. The Death Guard were enduring the physical trauma. It was a stalemate of attrition. But Rimuru knew this wasn't enough. A stalemate meant they would eventually look for the third player. He needed one side to start losing badly. He needed to tip the scales. "CL," Rimuru whispered in the dark. "Can we interact with the Nurgle network?" "Questionable," Seal said. "Nurgle's network is biological and spiritual. It is a disease." "Can we cure it?" Rimuru asked. "Locally. If we project a localized antidote field using the last of the holy energy, we could weaken the Death Guard ships. Their hulls are held together by rot. If we cure the rot, they fall apart." "Do it," Rimuru said. "Let's help the bugs." It was a decision that made Helbrecht wince. Helping Tyranids was against every instinct of an Astartes. But he stayed silent. He trusted the king. Rimuru projected the field. It was subtle, a wave of purification. It hit the flank of the Death Guard fleet. The rust on their ships turned to clean iron. The iron, no longer fused by magic, buckled under the stress of combat. 3 Death Guard cruisers broke in half. The Tyranids saw the weakness. They swarmed the broken ships. They began to feast. Mortarion felt the interference. He looked at the debris field where Rimuru was hiding. He knew. "The slime," Mortarion growled. "He is interfering." Mortarion ordered his escort ships to break off. "Bring me his head. Ignore the bugs. Kill the slime." 10 plague ships turned toward Rimuru's hiding spot. The Tyranids were busy eating the cruisers. Rimuru was exposed. "They're coming for us," Cheyenne said. "We can't fight 10 ships." "We don't have to," Rimuru said. "We just have to run." "Run where?" Helbrecht asked. "The warp drive is dead." Rimuru looked at the map of the Scourge stars. He saw a gravity well, a massive one. It wasn't a black hole. It was a warp gate, a permanent rift leading deeper into the Garden of Nurgle. "Into the fire," Rimuru said. "Gobta, aim for the gate." "That leads to the demon world," Helbrecht yelled. "We will be instantly corrupted." "Not if we are fast," Rimuru said. "And not if I eat the corruption before it touches us." The Star of Tempest fired its maneuvering thrusters. It shot out of the debris. The plague ships opened fire. Sludge missiles tracked them. Rimuru stood on the rear deck. He activated Gluttony. He created a black hole behind the ship. The missiles flew into the mouth of the skill. He ate the plague. It tasted like old socks and despair. They reached the gate. It was a swirling vortex of brown and green. "Hold your breath," Rimuru said. They plunged into the rift. The Federation fleet vanishing from real space, diving into the personal domain of a chaos god to escape a 3-way war. They had successfully lured the Tyranids to Mortarion, but the cost was their own safety. They were now lost in the warp, in the most hostile territory imaginable. And on the Terminus Est, Mortarion laughed. He didn't chase them. He didn't need to. No one escapes the garden. He turned back to fight the Tyranids. He would deal with the slime later, after the slime had ripened. But Mortarion didn't know one thing. Rimuru wasn't just a traveler. He was a terraformer, and bringing a cleaner into a garden of filth was a recipe for a very different kind of disaster. The great game was about to get a new player. The transition from the Scourge stars to the interior of the warp gate was not like a normal jump. There was no tunnel of light. There was a sensation of falling into a warm, wet throat. The Star of Tempest did not fly. It slid. The hull groaned as it scraped against walls of solidified pus and crystallized despair. The sensors died instantly. The machine spirits of the cogitators screamed and then went silent. General Hesh, connected to the ship's mainframe, convulsed. He ripped the interface cables from his skull. He stared at the blank screens with his optical lenses focusing and refocusing in panic. He whispered that the math was wrong. There were no integers here, only cycles of 7. The ship crashed. It did not hit ground. It hit a swamp. The impact was soft, squelching and sickening. The vessel listed to the port side, sinking into a mire of bubbling green fluids. The engine sputtered and died. The silence that followed was heavy. It was broken only by the sound of dripping and a low, constant buzzing of a billion wings. Rimuru stood on the bridge. He felt the atmosphere pressing against his skin. It was not air. It was a mixture of viral pathogens and warp energy. It was Nurgle's rot. His pain nullification and status condition nullification were working overtime. His magicule reserves were draining just to keep his human form intact. He looked at his crew. The mortal bridge officers were already sick. Their skin was turning gray. Their eyes were yellowing. They were coughing up black bile. Helbrecht fell to his knees. His armor, usually pristine silver, was tarnished. Rust spots appeared on the joints before their eyes. He gasped for breath. His lungs were filling with fluid. He looked at Rimuru with terror. It was the terror of a man who knows his soul is being digested. Rimuru realized they had minutes, not hours. If he did nothing, his crew would become poxwalkers. They would rise as smiling, shambling puppets of the plague god. CL, Rimuru thought. Isolation field. Now. Negative, Seal replied. Her voice sounded distant. External pressure exceeds output. The concept of health is being overwritten by the concept of acceptance. We cannot block it. We must adapt to it. I won't accept this, Rimuru said. He forced his body to expand. He didn't cover the ship. He released his aura. He imposed his own reality on the bridge. He used the Lord of Harvest skill. It was a sub-skill he had gained from the orc disaster, Geld. It was about consumption and starvation, but also about resource management. He tweaked it. He turned it into preservation. A gold light filled the bridge. The rust on Helbrecht's armor stopped spreading. The crew stopped coughing. They didn't get better, but they stopped getting worse. They were in stasis. We have to go outside, Rimuru said. We need to fix the engines. We need to leave before the ship sinks. Outside? Cheyenne asked. She was holding her nose. It smells like Shuna's compost bin, but evil. It's a garden, Rimuru said grimly, and we are the weeds. They moved to the airlock. Rimuru, Cheyenne, Helbrecht, and a squad of Tempest Templars. The airlock hissed open. The smell hit them like a physical blow. They stepped out onto the hull. The Star of Tempest was half submerged in a lake of bile. Giant trees made of bone and weeping flesh rose from the swamp. Their leaves were flayed skin. The sky was a bruised purple, filled with clouds of flies that formed faces of laughing children. Where are we? A Templar whispered. The Garden of Nurgle, Helbrecht said. He drew his sword. The blade was pitted. The domain of the Plague Father. We are dead. We are already dead. Not yet, Rimuru said. He looked at the engine exhaust ports. They were clogged with a thick, fungal growth. Massive vines pulsed like veins, pumping sludge into the thrusters. The ship was being infected. It was being turned into a living thing. Cheyenne, Rimuru pointed. Cut the vines. Cheyenne nodded. She jumped down to the engine casing. She swung Hercules' edge. The sword cut through the vines. They screamed. Blood sprayed from the severed plants. But for every vine she cut, 2 more grew back instantly. They lashed out, trying to grab her ankles. It's useless, Helbrecht said. Life here is infinite. You cannot kill it. Then we don't kill it, Rimuru said. We change it. Rimuru jumped down. He landed on a giant lily pad, made of a bloated face. He put his hand on the swamp water. Sile, analyze the water. Analysis. Composition. Warp plasma. Necrotic tissue. Nurgle's rot strain 777. Property. Rapid cellular decay and rebirth. Can we ferment it? Rimuru asked. Proposal confirmed, Seal said. Fermentation is a controlled form of decay. If we introduce a chaotic yeast strain, we can convert the rot into alcohol. Let's make some moonshine. Rimuru grinned. He activated Create Fluid. He pumped a massive amount of his own magicules into the swamp, encoded with the fermentation attribute. The reaction was violent. The green swamp water began to bubble furiously. It turned white. Then it turned clear. The smell of rot vanished, replaced by the overpowering scent of high-grade spirits. The vines attacking the ship drunk the alcohol. They stopped moving. They turned brown and wilted. They were drunk. "It's working!" Shion cheered. "Rimuru-sama is getting the garden drunk!" The fungal growth fell away from the engines. The ship groaned as the pressure released. "Hesh!" Rimuru shouted into his vox. "Restart the reactor! Use the alcohol fumes as fuel! It's highly combustible!" Inside the ship, the Magos worked the controls. The intake sucked in the fermented warp gas. The engine sputtered, then roared to life with a clean, blue flame. But the garden did not like being purified. The swamp shook. The trees shivered. From the tree line, figures emerged. They were plague bearers, demons with single eyes and horns. They carried rusted swords. They were counting the drops of alcohol. They were confused. Their tally was wrong. The stagnation had been broken. Leading them was a herald of Nurgle, a poxbringer. He was fat and jolly. He rode a palanquin carried by Nurglings. He looked at Rimuru. "Rude," the poxbringer burbled. "Grandfather spent eons brewing this soup, and you turned it into sanitizer." "I prefer my soup clean," Rimuru said. "Then you shall become an ingredient," the poxbringer laughed. He rang a bell. The sound was a shock wave of lethargy. The Tempest Templars dropped their weapons. They felt suddenly tired. They just wanted to lie down in the swamp and sleep. "No sleeping!" Rimuru yelled. He released a hockey blast. It woke them up. The plague bearers charged. They moved slowly, but they were unstoppable. They absorbed bolter fire. Their wounds closed with slime. Helbrecht fought. He hacked at them, but his movements were sluggish. The damp air sapped his strength. A plague bearer struck him. The rusty sword cut his armor. Helbrecht fell into the alcohol swamp. "Helbrecht!" Rimuru dived in after him. He grabbed the marshal. He pulled him up, but Helbrecht's skin was touching the warp fluid. Even fermented, it was dangerous. "Leave me," Helbrecht gasped. "I am tired." "I don't leave friends," Rimuru said. He threw Helbrecht back onto the hull. He turned to the demons. He was angry. "Beelzebub," Rimuru whispered. He didn't use a sword. He used his hand. A vortex of black mist appeared. He didn't eat the demons. He ate the space between them. He distorted the distance. The plague bearers stumbled. They were walking, but getting nowhere. Rimuru had created a localized, infinite corridor. "Shion, now! The engines are hot! Get us out!" But the ship couldn't lift off. Something was holding it down. Not vines. Gravity. A shadow fell over the swamp. A massive hand, the size of a mountain, reached down from the purple clouds. It was green and covered in sores. It was a great unclean one, Rodigus Rainfather. He had noticed the disturbance. He was not happy about the alcohol. "Little slime," the voice boomed, shaking the rivets of the ship. "You disrupt the cycle." The hand descended. It was going to crush the Star of Tempest like a toy boat. Rimuru looked up. He was out of options. He couldn't fight a greater demon in its own home. He had no magic left. Then, the sky tore open. It wasn't a warp rift. It was a biological breach. The ceiling of the garden, the metaphysical barrier, shattered. Falling through the hole were not demons. They were spores. Massive, acidic spores. And behind them came the bioships. Hive Fleet Kronos had found them. The Tyranids had followed the signal of the fake beacon all the way into the warp gate. They didn't care about the laws of reality. They were hungry, and they smelled the massive concentration of biomass that was the Great Unclean One. "Strategic chain reaction," Seal announced. "The Tyranid hive mind has identified the garden as a food source." The hand of Rodigus stopped. He looked up. Thousands of gargoyles were descending on him. They were spitting acid. The acid burned his divine flesh. "Bugs?" Rodigus sounded confused. "In the garden?" The Tyranids swarmed the Great Unclean One. They didn't have souls to corrupt. They didn't feel despair. They just ate. They bit into the demon flesh. They drank the pus. And something terrified happened. The Tyranids began to adapt. As they ate the demon flesh, their carapaces shifted. They developed pustules. They developed rust armor. They were assimilating the essence of Nurgle. But Kronos was the anti-chaos fleet. Its shadow in the warp clashed with Nurgle's aura. The plants in the garden began to wither, not from alcohol, but from null energy. The Tyranids were creating a dead zone. Rimuru saw the opportunity. "The hand is distracted," Rimuru yelled. "Launch!" The Star of Tempest fired its main thrusters. It broke free of the swamp. It flew up, past the face of the Great Unclean One, who was busy swatting at biotitans. They flew toward the tear in the sky where the Tyranids were entering. "We have to go through the breach," Rimuru ordered. "That's right into the Hive Fleet," Helbrecht yelled. "They aren't looking at us," Rimuru pointed. "They are looking at the giant fat guy. We're too small to matter right now." The ship shot through the chaotic aerial battle. On one side, a Tyranid crone ship was wrapping its tentacles around a plague tower. On the other, a squad of plague drones was fighting a harpy. It was a war of disgusting biology versus alien biology. The Star of Tempest cleared the atmosphere of the garden. They were back in the warp tunnel. But the tunnel was unstable. The intrusion of the Tyranids was collapsing the gate. "The exit is closing," Cheyenne shouted. "Maximum power," Rimuru commanded. He ran to the engine room. He didn't check the controls. He merged with the core. He fed the last of his own essence into the drive. "Ciel, calculate the jump coordinates. Anywhere in real space. Just get us out." "Calculated," Ciel said. "Destination. The Ultima Segmentum. The Ghoul Stars. It is far. Probability of survival, 40%. Do it." The ship accelerated. The tunnel behind them collapsed. The Tyranids and the demons were sealed inside the pocket dimension. They were trapped together. Rimuru had accidentally created a closed ecosystem where Nurgle and the hive mind would fight for eternity. The Star of Tempest shot out of the warp. They crashed back into real space. The ship spun out of control. The engines exploded. They were drifting. Silence returned. Rimuru pulled himself out of the engine core. He was a puddle. He couldn't hold his shape. He slithered to the bridge. "Status?" he bubbled. Helbrecht was lying on the floor. He was alive. The rust on his armor had stopped spreading. He looked out the viewport. "We are. Somewhere," Helbrecht whispered. The stars were pale and ghostly. This was the Ghoul Stars, a region of space that even the Imperium feared. "We lost the fleet," Cheyenne said quietly. "We are alone. But we are alive." Rimuru formed a small face in the slime, and we left Mortarion, a present. Back in the Garden of Nurgle, the war raged. But something had changed. The Tyranids that had eaten the garden were not dying. They were mutating. A new strain was born, a strain that could eat warp energy and turn it into biomass. Rimuru had saved his crew, but he had fundamentally altered the balance of the great game. He had taught the Tyranids how to eat a god. In the Ghoul Stars, the Star of Tempest drifted. It was dark. It was cold. "We need repairs," Rimuru said. "We need resources." "There is a planet nearby," Seal reported. "It is dead, but it has faint energy signatures. Necron signatures. But different. Different how? They are not green, Seal said. They are red. Rimuru reformed his human eyes. He looked at the screen. A planet hung in the void. It was made of bone and flayed skin, and on its surface, pyramids of red flux glowed. The Flayed Ones, Helbrecht said, his voice trembling. The kingdom of Drazak. They had jumped from the frying pan into the freezer. Well, Rimuru sighed, I guess we have to make more friends. The Star of Tempest, crippled and isolated in the most haunted region of the galaxy. Rimuru was drained. His strongest allies were battered, and they were drifting toward a planet ruled by Necrons who wore the skin of their enemies. But Rimuru had achieved his strategic goal. Kronos was off the board. Mortarion was busy. The Imperium was confused. He had bought time. Now, he just had to survive the night in a haunted house. And deep in the databanks of the ship, a small file was compiling. Seal had recorded the data of the fermentation process in the garden. She was analyzing it. She had found a way to synthesize an anti-Nurgle vaccine. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The cure was born from the poison. Rimuru-sama, Shion asked, looking at the red planet. Do you think they have food there? I think, Rimuru said, looking at the bone structures on the surface. We are the food. The ship drifted closer. The red lights on the planet blinked. They were waking up. The surface of Drazak was a landscape of madness. It was not made of rock or soil. It was made of discarded trophies. Mountains of bleached bones rose into the black sky. Oceans of tattered skin rippled in the thin, cold wind. The Star of Tempest descended toward this nightmare. Its engines were dead. Its hull was scarred by the acids of Nurgle. It crashed into a valley of ribs. The sound was deafening. Dust made of pulverized calcium filled the air. The ship skidded for kilometers before coming to a halt against a fortress made of fused spines. Inside the ship, the gravity plates failed. Rimuru hit the ceiling, then the floor. He was still in a semi-fluid state. His energy was critically low. He reformed his human shape, but it was flickering. One moment he was a boy, the next a slime. He looked at Helbrecht. The High Marshal was unconscious. His armor was locked in survival mode. Shion was awake, but she was clutching her head. The psychic scream of this planet was different from the warp. It was a scream of hunger. Infinite, hollow hunger. Rimuru checked the external sensors. They were fuzzy, but they showed movement. Thousands of shapes were crawling over the bone dunes. They were long-limbed, hunched metallic figures. They wore the skins of orcs, Eldar, and humans like ragged cloaks. Long claws dragged on the ground. The Flayed Ones. The cursed Necrons, who had been infected by the dying breath of the Catan Landogor. They wanted to eat, but they had no mouths. They wanted to breathe, but they had no lungs. They only knew the hunt. We cannot stay inside, Rimuru whispered. They will tear the hull apart to get to us. We fight? Shion asked, standing up shakily. No, Rimuru said. There are millions of them, and we are tired. We talk. Talk to them? Shion looked at the monsters on the screen. They look unreasonable. Everyone is reasonable if you offer them what they need, Rimuru said. He opened the airlock. The cold air hit him. It smelled of old blood and copper. He walked out onto the hull. He amplified his voice. I am Rimuru Tempest, he shouted. I come in peace. The horde stopped. Thousands of red optical sensors focused on him. Then they shrieked. It was a digital screech of static. They charged. They didn't care about peace. They cared about the fresh, exotic meat standing on the metal bird. Rimuru sighed. Plan B. Defense. He raised his hand. He tried to summon a barrier, but the planet Drazak had its own dampening field. It wasn't a null field like the Pariah Nexus. It was a field of entropy. Magic degraded here. His barrier formed, but it was thin like glass. The first flayed one leaped at him. Its claws were phase blades that could cut reality. It slashed the barrier. The barrier shattered. Rimuru dodged. He turned his arm into a blade of black steel. He parried the next blow. Sparks flew. "Meat!" the flayed one hissed. Its voice box was broken. "Warm meat!" "I'm not meat," Rimuru yelled. "I'm slime." He kicked the Necron away. But 10 more took its place. They were swarming the ship. They were tearing at the airlock doors. Inside, the crew was screaming. Then, a horn blew. It was a sound like a dying star, a low, mournful note that vibrated through the bones of the planet. The flayed ones froze. They dropped to the ground. They cowered. They pressed their metal faces into the dust. From the spine fortress, a figure emerged. He was taller than the others. He wore a cloak made not of skin, but of woven light and shadow. His armor was cracked and ancient. He carried a staff, topped with a flayed skull. Valgul the Fallen, the Ghost King of Drezak. He floated toward the ship. He did not look at the flayed ones. He looked at Rimuru. "You," Valgul rasped. "You smell alive, but you are not." "I am a slime," Rimuru said, "and I need spare parts." Valgul laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. "Spare parts? We are all broken here. We are the discarded. Why should I not peel you and wear your shimmer?" "Because my skin dissolves metal," Rimuru lied, "and because I can give you something better than skin." Valgul paused. He floated closer. "What is better than skin?" "Skin is warmth. Skin is the memory of breath." "Sensation," Rimuru said. "You wear skin because you want to remember what it feels like to be alive, to feel the wind, to feel heat. But dead skin is cold. It doesn't work." Valgul looked at his own tattered cloak. He touched it with a claw. "It is cold. Always cold." "I can fix that," Rimuru said. "I can make you feel again." It was a dangerous promise. Seal warned him. "Alert. Magiculae reserves insufficient for mass sensory projection. Attempting this will induce hibernation state." "I don't need to project to everyone," Rimuru thought. "Just him. The king." Rimuru stepped forward. He extended his hand. He didn't offer a weapon. He offered a handshake. "Let me show you," Rimuru said. Valgul hesitated. The hunger in his logic circuit screamed at him to kill. But the sorrow in his engrams wanted to know. He reached out. His metal claw touched Rimuru's hand. Rimuru didn't pull away. He activated physical magic, thermal transfer. He didn't just heat up his hand. He simulated the flow of blood, the pulse of a heart, the electrical signals of a nervous system. He pushed this data into Valgul's necrodermis. For Valgul, the universe exploded. For 60 million years, he had felt nothing but the cold void. Now, his hand felt heat. It felt the texture of the air. It felt the vibration of Rimuru's voice. It was overwhelming. It was intoxicating. Valgul fell to his knees. He gripped Rimuru's hand with both claws. He didn't crush it. He held it like a sacred relic. "Warm," Valgul whispered. "So warm." The other flayed ones watched. They sensed the change in their king. They crawled closer. They didn't attack. They reached out, begging. "Me," one hissed. "Me, too." Rimuru looked at the sea of monsters. They were victims, cursed by a dead god to be hungry forever. He couldn't heal them all. Not like this. "Chiel," Rimuru said. "Do we have the data from the Nurgle fermentation?" "Affirmative," Seal said. "We have the code for cellular regeneration. Can we combine it with living metal?" Hypothesis. If we create a synthetic slime mold that mimics the properties of biological nervous systems and coat the Necrons in it, it would act as a permanent sensory interface. "Synthetic skin," Rimuru said. Living skin. Resource cost is extreme, Seal said. You would need to consume the biomass of the entire planet's bone piles to create enough base material. Then we start recycling, Rimuru said. He looked at Valgul. I can give this to all of you, but I need your help. I need your bones. Valgul looked up. His optical lenses were bright red. Take them. Take the world. Just make the cold stop. The agreement was made. The strategic alliance of the Ghoul Stars. Rimuru activated Gluttony, but this time he didn't aim at an enemy. He aimed at the ground. He turned into a massive slime lake. He began to consume the mountains of bone. He ate the history of 1,000 slaughters. He broke down the calcium and the carbon. Inside his stomach, CL worked the alchemy. She mixed the bone matter with Rimuru's magicules. She created a gray, viscous paste. It wasn't pretty, but it was conductive. Rimuru spat the paste out. It covered the flayed ones. It seeped into their joints. It hardened into a flexible, rubbery layer. The flayed ones screamed, but not in anger, in shock. They touched their faces. They touched each other. They could feel. The curse wasn't broken, but the hunger was fed. They didn't need to hunt for skin anymore. They were wearing a skin of magic. Valgul stood up. He was covered in the gray substance. He looked like a knight in matte armor. He bowed to Rimuru. The hunger sleeps, Valgul said. We are grateful. What is your command, Skin Giver? Fix my ship, Rimuru said, and get me home. The flayed ones were master scavengers. They swarmed the Star of Tempest. They didn't tear it apart. They repaired it. They used Necron technology. They welded the hull with Gauss arcs. They replaced the burnt human circuitry with living metal pathways. They replaced the dead engine core with a shard of a Satan prison they dug up from the planet's core. In 3 days, the ship was ready. It didn't look like an Imperial ship anymore. It looked like a predator. It was sleek, dark, and ribbed with bone. Rimuru stood on the bridge. He was exhausted. He had used almost all his power. He couldn't maintain his human form for long. He had to stay as a slime most of the time. We are ready, Helbrecht said. He looked at the strange Necron crewmen working the consoles. He had stopped asking questions. He had accepted that his life was now a fever dream. Set course for Griffone IV, Rimuru ordered. Wait, Valgul said. He appeared on the bridge. He wasn't staying on Drazak. I go with you. The skin needs recharging. I will serve. Rimuru nodded. Welcome aboard. The ship launched. It didn't use a warp drive. It used the Flayed One's method of travel. The ghost wind. A dimension between dimensions. It was faster than the warp. And it was silent. They traveled for what felt like a week. But time in the Ghoul Stars is broken. When they emerged from the ghost wind at the edge of the Griffone sector, CL gave a report that made Rimuru cold. Chronological discrepancy detected, Seal said. Time elapsed in real space, 6 months. 6 months? Rimuru yelled. We were gone for 6 months? Affirmative, Seal said, and the strategic situation has changed. Rimuru looked at the tactical map. The blue icons of the Federation were gone. The sector was red. While Rimuru was gone, the Imperium had not sat idle. Inquisitor Valerius had returned to Terra. He had reported that Rimuru was dead, killed by the Assassins, a lie to save face. He claimed the Federation was leaderless. The High Lords had authorized a crusade of fire, led by the Red Hunters chapter and the Order of the Bloody Rose. They had invaded. Without Rimuru, the Federation had fought bravely. The Tempest Templars held the line. Shuna and Benimaru, who had been managing the defense, had used every trick in the book. But they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Griffone IV was under siege. The orbital defense grid was smashed. Imperial drop pods were raining on Rimuru City. "They think I'm dead," Rimuru whispered. He looked at the planet. He saw the fires. He saw his flag burning. "Valgul," Rimuru said. "Yes, Skin Giver." "Are your people hungry?" "Always," Valgul said. "Good," Rimuru said, "because I have a lot of tin cans that need opening." Rimuru connected to the ship's comms. He broadcasted a signal. Not a voice, a feeling. He broadcasted his aura. On the surface of Griffon 4, in the ruins of the Central Plaza, General Benimaru was bleeding. He stood over the body of a fallen Tempest Templar. He held his katana. He was surrounded by Sisters of Battle. Canoness Iria stepped forward. She aimed her bolter at Benimaru's head. "Your false god is dead, Xenos," she sneered. "Repent." Benimaru smiled. He felt it. The vibration in the air. The taste of honey and storms. "He's not dead," Benimaru said. "He was just getting groceries." The sky tore open. It wasn't a drop pod. It was a spear of black metal. The Star of Tempest slammed into the atmosphere. It didn't slow down. It crashed into the middle of the Imperial formation. The shockwave knocked the sisters off their feet. The ramp opened. Rimuru didn't walk out. He flowed out. He was a massive, dark blue slime. He was angry. And behind him came the nightmare. Valgul the Fallen led the charge. 10,000 Flayed Ones poured out of the ship. They didn't scream. They ghosted. They moved through solid objects. They appeared behind the Sisters of Battle. "Skin," the Flayed Ones whispered. The sisters turned to fight. They fired bolters. The explosive rounds hit the Flayed Ones. But the synthetic skin Rimuru had given them absorbed the impact. It hardened on contact. Valgul waved his staff. The shadows of the sisters came to life. They grabbed their owners. "Do not kill them!" Rimuru's voice boomed over the battlefield. "Disarm them! Scare them! But do not eat them!" The Flayed Ones obeyed. It was difficult, but they obeyed. They shredded the bolters. They ripped the power armor apart, leaving the sisters in their undersuits, terrified but alive. Rimuru gathered his magicules. He was weak, but he was on his home turf now. The amplifier tower, though damaged, was still standing. He connected to it. "CL, system restore. Acknowledged." Drawing ambient magicules from the planet. Rimuru's form condensed. He turned human again. He wore his black coat. He stood in the center of the carnage. Canoness Iria looked at him. She was shaking. "Demon, you are supposed to be dead." "I am a slime," Rimuru said. We bounced back. He looked up at the sky. The Imperial fleet was still there. The Divine Right was charging its lance batteries. Inquisitor Valerius was trying to finish the job. "Target the palace," Valerius screamed on his bridge. "Burn it all!" "Lord Inquisitor," his sensor officer stammered. "We have multiple contacts emerging from the ghost wind." "More Necrons?" "No, sir. It's everything." Rimuru had not come back alone. The signal he sent wasn't just for his people. It was for his allies. From the eastern fringe, a Tau fleet arrived. Cheyenne had called in her favor. The Purple Empress led a formation of Manta missile destroyers. From the moon of Velos, a green light flared. The Necron garrison, honoring the Velos protocol, activated their doomsday arcs. They were technically defending their territory. And from the shadows of the warp, a single, massive barge appeared. It was black and white. The Eternal Crusader. High Marshal Helbrecht's flagship. It had been repaired by the Flayed Ones. The Imperial Crusade was surrounded. They were trapped between Tau railguns, Necron Gauss beams, and a legion of insane, skin-wearing robots. Rimuru projected his face into the sky. A giant hologram. "Inquisitor Valerius," Rimuru shouted. "You broke my windows, you killed my flowers, and you made my friends cry." Valerius watched the screen. He saw the alien coalition. He saw the heresy. He saw the end of his career. "You are an abomination," Valerius yelled. "The Emperor will judge you." "Maybe," Rimuru said. "But today, I am the judge." Rimuru raised his hand. "Disarm them." The Tau fleet fired. They didn't aim for the hulls. They aimed for the weapon systems. Precise surgical railgun shots disabled the Imperial macro cannons. The Necrons fired EMP bursts that shut down the void shields. The divine right was drifting. It was helpless. Rimuru flew up to the battleship. He passed through the hull using the ghost wind phase shift he had learned from Valgul. He appeared on the bridge. The crew drew their sidearms. Valerius pointed his bolt pistol at Rimuru. "Stay back," Valerius shouted. Rimuru didn't move. He looked at the Inquisitor. "You killed Avaris," Rimuru said softly. "You killed 10 billion people to send a message." "It was necessary," Valerius spat, "to save the soul of mankind." "I have seen the soul of mankind," Rimuru said. "It's hungry, it's scared, and it doesn't want to die." Rimuru walked forward. The bolt pistol fired. The shell hit Rimuru's forehead. It flattened and fell to the floor. Rimuru reached out. He took the pistol from Valerius's hand. He crushed it. "I am not going to kill you," Rimuru said. "Why?" Valerius sneered. "Because you are weak?" "Because you are going to work for me," Rimuru said. "Never. You love the Emperor, right?" Rimuru asked. "With all my life." "Good," Rimuru said, "because I'm going to fix him. And you are going to carry the toolbox." Rimuru turned to the view screen. He looked at the fleet. "Surrender," Rimuru ordered, "or I let the Flayed Ones come up here for lunch." Valerius looked at the red icons on his tactical plot. He looked at the terrifying Necron Ghost King waiting on the surface. He looked at the Tau. He looked at the slime. He slumped in his chair. "Surrender," he whispered. The crusade of fire ended, not with a bang, but with a command. Rimuru returned to the surface. His people cheered. They cried. They touched his coat to make sure he was real. Xion hugged him so hard she almost broke his ribs. "You were late for dinner." "Sorry," Rimuru laughed. "Traffic was bad." But later that night, Rimuru stood on the balcony. He looked at the stars. He had won again. But the cost was getting higher. He had allied with monsters to fight monsters. He had invited the Flayed Ones into his home. CL spoke in his mind. "Warning! The balance of the galaxy has shifted. The awakening of the Flayed Ones has triggered a response from the Silent King. He is displeased." "I know," Rimuru said. "And the Emperor?" "The psychic signal from Terra has changed," CL said. "It is no longer observing. It is beckoning." "He wants me to visit," Rimuru realized. "And," CL added, "we have a new problem. The Tyranids in the Garden of Nurgle. They are not trapped anymore." "What?" "They have eaten the garden," CL said. "They have consumed the concept of disease. They are evolving into a new Hive Fleet. Hive Fleet Apotheosis." Rimuru put his head in his hands. "I just wanted to build a town." "You built an empire," CL said. "Now you must rule it." Rimuru now controlled a sector defended by the most horrific alliance in history. But the threats were evolving. The Tyranids were becoming gods. The Emperor was waking up. And somewhere in the dark, Abaddon the Despoiler was gathering the 13th Black Crusade. He wasn't going to Cadia this time. He was coming to Griffon. Rimuru went to his room. He took out the mask Shizu had given him. He looked at it. "One more adventure," Rimuru whispered. "Then I retire." He placed the mask on the desk. Beside it, he placed a datapad. The screen displayed a single coordinate. Terra. It was time to meet the landlord. The week following the defeat of the Imperial Crusade was not a time of celebration. It was a time of frantic fortification. The atmosphere of Griffon 4 was thick with the ozone smell of welding torches and the copper scent of Valgul's Flayed Ones. The Necrons of Drazak did not sleep. They scuttled across the hulls of the Federation fleet, reinforcing adamantium with living metal. They built obelisks of bone and blackstone in the city squares. These were not monuments. They were emitters. Valgul explained that the hunger of the galaxy was converging, and they needed to mask the scent of the living. Rimuru watched from the palace balcony. He saw the Tau engineers working alongside the tech priests of Mars who had defected to his cause. It was a beautiful, impossible sight, a unity born of desperation. But Rimuru knew it was fragile. CL's predictive models showed a 99% probability of a catastrophic invasion within the month. The question was not who would come, but who would arrive first. The answer came on a Tuesday. It did not come from the warp. It came from real space, but it carried the warp with it. The sensors at the edge of the system died instantly. They didn't register a fleet. They registered a bruise on the fabric of reality. Abaddon the Despoiler had not come to raid. He had come to erase. The 13th Black Crusade had been diverted from its path of terror to answer the challenge of the Blue Saint. The vengeful spirit, the flagship that had killed the Imperium's dream 10,000 years ago, led the formation. It was surrounded by a cloud of smaller ships, millions of cultist transports, and the twisted hulks of the Dark Mechanicum. But the centerpiece was the Planet Killer. The massive doomsday weapon, shaped like a spearhead, glowed with the raw energy of the Imperium. Rimuru stood in the war room. The hologram of the system turned red. There were too many ships to count. This was not a sector fleet. This was a legion, the Black Legion. And they had brought friends. The World Eaters were there, their ships painted in fresh blood. The Alpha Legion was there, their signals ghosting and lying to the sensors. Abaddon had united the chaotic factions with a single promise: the death of the false hope. To chaos, Rimuru was worse than the Emperor. The Emperor was a corpse that demanded order. Rimuru was a living variable that offered a different kind of order, an order that didn't feed the gods. High Marshal Helbrecht stood beside Rimuru. He was fully armored. His sword was sharpened. He looked at the screen. He knew this enemy. He had fought the Black Legion for centuries. He told Rimuru that Abaddon does not negotiate. He does not stop. He will burn the planet to the core just to prove a point. Rimuru nodded. He asked Valgul if the Ghost Wind could hide the planet. Valgul shook his head. The mass of the Chaos fleet was too great. Their psychic scream drowned out the silence. They had to fight. The battle began in the high orbit. The Federation fleet, repaired and upgraded with Necron technology, moved to intercept. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they had the advantage of insanity. The Star of Tempest fired its main gun. It was no longer a standard macro cannon. It was a Gauss railgun hybrid, designed by Xion and the Flayed Ones. It fired a slug of solid tungsten wrapped in a disintegration field. The slug hit a Chaos Grand Cruiser. It didn't explode. It erased the center of the ship. The cruiser collapsed in on itself. But the Black Legion didn't flinch. They launched boarding torpedoes. Millions of them. They blackened the stars. They slammed into the Federation ships. They slammed into the orbital defense platforms. They slammed into the surface of Griffon 4. The ground war began instantly. Drop pods painted with the Eye of Horus crashed into the city streets. Chaos Space Marines poured out. They were giants of ceramite and hate. They roared praises to the dark gods. Rimuru deployed his forces. The Tempest Templars met the Black Legion in the streets. Blue and silver clashed with black and gold. It was a slaughter. The Chaos Marines were veterans of the Long War. They were stronger, faster, and more brutal. A berserker of Khorne cut through a squad of Templars with a chain axe, laughing as the blood sprayed. He screamed for skulls. Then a Flayed One materialized from the shadows. It wrapped its long metal claws around the berserker. It whispered about skin. The berserker hacked at the robot, but the living metal healed instantly. The Flayed One peeled the armor off the Marine like a fruit. The screaming changed tone. On the northern continent, The Tau forces were holding the line against a tide of cultists. The fire warriors fired their pulse rifles in disciplined volleys. Walls of last fire cut down the screaming hordes. But for every cultist that died, 3 more climbed over the bodies. And behind the cultists came the demon engines. Defilers scuttled on spider legs, firing battle cannons. Helldrake swooped from the sky, burning the Tau battlesuits with balefire. Shion was there. She led a countercharge. She rode a customized Tau Piranha skimmer. Standing on the hull with Hercules' edge in her hand, she leapt onto a defiler. She cut its head off. She looked like a goddess of war. But she was tired. The corruption of the enemy was heavy. It weighed on the soul. Abaddon did not stay on his ship. He teleported to the surface. He appeared in the Plaza of the Saint, directly in front of the palace. He was a mountain of Terminator armor. The talon of Horus was on one hand, the demon sword Drachnian on the other. He looked at the statue of Rimuru. He sneered. He raised the talon and fired the bolter integrated into it. The statue exploded. "Come out!" Abaddon roared. His voice cracked the pavement. "Come out, little slime, or I will skin this world alive." Rimuru walked out of the palace gates. He was in his human form. He wore his mask. He held his katana. He did not look afraid. He looked sad. He saw the city burning. He saw the sky filled with smoke. "You are loud," Rimuru said. Abaddon laughed. "And you are small. The galaxy speaks of a monster. I see a child." "I am the chancellor of this federation," Rimuru said, "and you are trespassing." "I am the war master of chaos," Abaddon retorted. "I go where I please, and I please to stand on your corpse." He charged. He moved with a speed that defied his bulk. Drachnian screamed as it sliced the air. It was a sword made from the first murder. It cut reality. Rimuru dodged. He used thought acceleration to boost his reaction time to 1,000,000 times normal. He saw the blade coming. He saw the tear in the universe it created. He parried with his katana. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave leveled the surrounding buildings. Rimuru was thrown back. His sword was chipped. Drachnian was hungry. It wanted to eat Rimuru's soul. Sael warned him, "That sword is a conceptual weapon. It cannot be blocked by physical matter. It must be blocked by will." Rimuru stood up. He flared his aura. Gold light pushed back the black aura of the War Master. They clashed again and again. Sparks of gold and black lightning tore the sky. It was a duel of gods. But Abaddon was relentless. He had the blessing of all 4 chaos gods. He had the mark of Ascendant. He didn't tire. Rimuru was burning his reserves just to stay alive. "You cannot win," Abaddon shouted. "The long war ends here." He struck Rimuru with the talon of Horus. The lightning claws raked across Rimuru's chest. The absolute defense barrier shattered. Rimuru bled blue fluid. He rolled backward. He was hurt. Suddenly, the sky turned white. It was not the sun. It was not an explosion. It was a tear. A massive, biological tear in the fabric of space-time. Above the battle, the clouds parted. A bioship descended. But it was not like the Tyranids they knew. It was not purple and chitinous. It was white and glowing. It pulsed with a radiant, sickly light. It looked like an angel made of meat. Hive Fleet Apotheosis had arrived. The Tyranids that Rimuru had trapped in Nurgle's garden had not just survived. They had thrived. They had eaten the demons. They had eaten the rot. And they had adapted. They had assimilated the concept of immortality. They were no longer driven by simple hunger. They were driven by a twisted desire to save all life by making it part of their perfect unity. The Apotheosis ships fired. They didn't fire acid. They fired beams of white light. The beams hit the Black Legion ships. The ships didn't explode. They changed. The metal turned into flesh. The guns turned into mouths. The Chaos Marines inside were instantly fused with their armor. turning into statues of white bone. "What is this?" Abaddon stopped his attack. He looked up. He felt the warp recoil. The Chaos Gods were screaming. This was not their corruption. This was something new, something that overwrote the warp. "The Garden," Rimuru whispered. "They ate the Garden." The Apotheosis. Tyranids landed. They didn't drop pods. They manifested. They walked out of light beams. They were tall, elegant creatures made of white porcelain bone and golden muscle. They didn't screech. They sang, a low melodic hum that made the ears bleed. They attacked everyone. They attacked the Chaos Marines. They attacked the Flayed Ones. They attacked the Templars. A white lictor leaped at a Khorne berserker. The berserker swung his axe. The axe passed through the lictor like it was light. The lictor touched the Marine's forehead. The Marine stopped screaming. His red armor turned white. His eyes turned gold. He dropped his axe. He joined the chorus. He had been saved. "They are assimilating souls," Seal reported. Her voice was trembling. "They are rewriting the informational structure of the target. They are not killing. They are converting." This was the end. The Federation couldn't fight this. Chaos couldn't fight this. This was a flood of aggressive perfection. Abaddon looked at Rimuru. "You did this," he growled. "You broke the game." "I didn't mean to," Rimuru said. The War Master looked at the white tide consuming his legion. He made a calculation. He could kill Rimuru, but then he would be consumed by the Apotheosis. Or he could retreat and let the slime deal with his own mess. "This is not over," Abaddon spat. He activated his teleport homer. "I will watch you die from the void." Abaddon vanished. The Black Legion, seeing their master leave, broke. They fled to their ships. They ran from the white light. Now it was just Rimuru and the Apotheosis. The white Tyranids turned toward the palace. The Norn queen of this fleet, a being of blinding radiance, descended. She spoke. Not psychically, but acoustically. "Unity," she sang. "Peace. Silence." Rimuru felt the pull. It was stronger than the Silent King's null field. It was stronger than Nurgle's rot. It was a desire to give up, to become part of the song. "Rimuru-sama!" Cheyenne yelled. She was fighting a white warrior. Her sword bounced off its skin. "They don't take damage. They heal instantly." "We can't win," Helbrecht said. He was backing away. "They are absolute." Rimuru looked at his people. They were being converted. A squad of Templars was already turning white, dropping their weapons, smiling blankly. "Ciel," Rimuru thought. "Is there a solution?" "Answer," Ciel said. "No tactical solution exists within local assets. The Apotheosis represents a singularity of biological and spiritual power. To defeat it, you need a higher authority. You need a sanction." "What kind of sanction?" "The anathema," Ciel said. At that moment, time stopped. It wasn't a spell. It was a direct intervention. Rimuru found himself standing in a golden void. The battlefield was gone. The fire was gone. In front of him sat a figure on a throne. The figure was a corpse, a skeleton wrapped in wires and gold machinery. But the eyes were not dead. They were burning with the light of 1,000 suns. The Emperor of mankind. He didn't speak with words. He spoke with concepts. He showed Rimuru the galaxy. He showed him the Tyranids consuming everything. He showed him the Chaos Gods laughing. And he showed him a path. "The light must be focused," the Emperor's thought echoed in Rimuru's soul. "You are a lens, but you are out of position." "You want me to come to Terra," Rimuru said. "I want you to be the torch," the Emperor replied. "Bring the flame to the throne world. I can amplify it. I can burn the white plague. But you must be the fuel." "If I leave," Rimuru said, "my people die. The Apotheosis will eat Grifone." "No," The Emperor showed him a vision. If you come to me, I will extend the Aegis. I will cast my shadow over your sector. The Astronomicon will shield them. But only if you are with me. The link must be direct. It was the unavoidable offer. Trade himself for his people. And what happens to me? Rimuru asked. You evolve, the Emperor said, or you burn. The choice is yours. Time restarted. Rimuru was back in the plaza. The White Norn Queen was reaching for him. Rimuru-sama! Xion screamed. Rimuru made his choice. Helbrecht! Rimuru shouted. Listen to me. My lord! I have to go, Rimuru said. I have to go to Terra. It's the only way to stop them. You can't leave, Helbrecht cried. We will fall. No, Rimuru said. You won't. The Emperor is watching. He promised. Rimuru turned to Valgul. Keep them safe, Ghost King. Use the Ghost Wind. Hide the planet until the storm passes. Valgul nodded slowly. We will be the shadow. Rimuru looked at Xion. Take care of them. Don't cook anything weird. Rimuru-sama. Xion was crying. Rimuru took out his mask. He put it on. He looked at the Norn Queen. You want light? Rimuru asked. I'll give you the sun. He activated his ultimate skill. But he didn't aim it at the enemy. He aimed it at himself. He harmonized his soul with the signal from Terra. Teleportation. Destination. Holy Terra. Throne room. A beam of golden light shot down from the heavens. It punched through the clouds. It punched through the Tyranid blockade. It hit Rimuru. The Norn Queen shrieked. The light was too pure. It burned her eyes. She recoiled. The beam expanded. It covered the entire planet of Gryphony 4 for a second. In that second, a psychic barrier slammed into place, the Aegis of the Emperor. It was a wall of golden fire that the Tyranids could not touch. The Apotheosis fleet smashed against it and burned. Rimuru was gone. He was traveling through the webway, guided by the Emperor's own hand. He was leaving his kingdom to save it. He materialized not in a spaceport, but in the most sacred place in the universe, the Sanctum Imperialis. The air was dry and smelled of incense and ozone. The massive Eternity Gate stood behind him. Ahead of him, the golden throne hummed with the power of a dying god. The Custodes, the 10,000, leveled their guardian spears at him. They were the perfect warriors. They did not hesitate. Halt! Captain General Trajan Valoris boomed. Identify yourself, intruder! Rimuru raised his hands. He took off his mask. He looked at the golden throne. He looked at the corpse that ruled 1,000,000 worlds. I'm Rimuru Tempest, the slime said, and I think your boss called for a plumber. The machinery of the throne groaned. A psychic wind swept through the room. The Custodes hesitated. They heard the whisper in their minds. Let him pass. Rimuru walked up the steps. He stood before the Emperor. So, Rimuru said, looking at the skeletal face, you made a mess of things, didn't you? The Emperor didn't answer, but the psychic pressure in the room shifted. It wasn't hostile. It was expectant. CL, Rimuru thought, can we analyze the life support system? Analysis complete, CL said. It is failing. The Golden Throne has a fatal error in the soul transfer matrix. It requires a stabilizer, a filter. Like a slime, Rimuru smiled. Exactly, CL said. Rimuru placed his hand on the Golden Throne. He didn't sit on it. He merged with it. He let his slime body flow into the cracks of the ancient machinery. He became the conduit. Raphael. No, CL, Rimuru whispered. Initiate system update. Acknowledged. Beginning defragmentation of the Imperial Webway project. The Golden Throne flared. The light changed from a dying yellow to a brilliant, blinding blue. Across the galaxy, the Astronomicon flickered. And then it roared. It didn't just guide ships anymore. It healed. The light washed over the Imperium. On Gryphon 4, The golden barrier turned blue. The Tyranids of the Apotheosis screamed as their connection to their hive mind was severed by the sudden surge of order. They collapsed. They turned into dust. Helbrecht watched the sky. He fell to his knees. He did it. He actually did it. On the vengeful spirit, Abaddon watched the Astronomicon turn blue. He crushed his wine goblet. The anathema has evolved. And in the warp, the Chaos Gods stopped their great game. They looked at Terra. They felt a chill. A new player had sat at the table, and he wasn't playing by their rules. Rimuru was now part of the throne, but he wasn't trapped. He was the administrator. Okay, Rimuru's voice echoed in the mind of every human on Terra. Let's fix this place up. First rule, no more starving. This ended with the ultimate convergence. The slime had become the battery of the Imperium. The immediate threats were neutralized, but the consequences were infinite. Rimuru had saved the galaxy, but he had lost his freedom. He was now the most powerful being in the universe, and also the most constrained. The story of the Conqueror was over. The story of the God Emperor of Slime had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The age of the Dark Imperium did not end with a sword stroke. It ended with a hum. In the Sanctum Imperialis, the screaming stopped. For 10,000 years, the machinery of the Golden Throne had been a torture device, fed by the souls of 1,000 Psychers of Mao's day. Now the intake valves were closed. The black ships orbited Terra with full holds, waiting for an order that never came. Captain General Trajan Valoris stood watch. He had not moved for 3 days. He watched the golden cables turn a translucent, shifting blue. The corpse of the Emperor sat motionless, but the air around him smelled of ozone and honey. It was the smell of the Tempest. Frobut Guilliman received the news on the bridge of the Macraga's Honor. The Astronomicon had changed frequency. Navigators reported that the light was no longer blindingly cold. It was warm. It guided them around warp storms rather than burning through them. Warp travel became safer. Safer meant faster logistics. Faster logistics meant the Indomitus Crusade could move at double speed. Guilliman looked at the data slate. He saw the projected survival rates of humanity. The line, which had been plummeting toward extinction, had leveled off. It was the first time in his life he had seen a flat line. He did not smile. He knew the cost. He knew that a Xenos, or whatever Rimuru was, sat at the heart of his father's empire. The ecclesiarchy was in chaos. Half called it a miracle, half called it the end times. Guilliman called it a reprieve. On Griffon 4, the statues of the saint were not draped in black. They were draped in white cloth. High Marshal Helbrecht stood on the walls of the palace. He looked at the repaired city. The Flayed Ones of Drazak had retreated into the shadows of the Underhives, acting as silent guardians. The Federation was safe. But the chair in the Chancellor's office was empty. Cheyenne polished the desk every morning. She prepared tea every afternoon. She told the generals that Rimuru was simply on a business trip to the capital. It was a lie that gave them strength. The galaxy was still full of horrors. The Tyranids would evolve again. The Necrons were stirring. Chaos was regrouping. But the nature of the war had changed. It was no longer a desperate rage against the dying of the light. The light was fixed. Now, the galaxy had to survive the brightness. The 42nd millennium was not the end. It was the beginning of the Blue Era.